I was 57, missing an arm, standing in an airport when 4 massive men surrounded my wife. One punch later, the biggest one was unconscious on the floor. But that wasn't the shocking part. The real shock was discovering what my wife had been hiding from me for 10 years. And by the time I finished telling you what that was, you were not going to believe she kept it as long as she did. Before I go any further, do me one small favor. Where are you watching from? Whatever country, whatever city, whatever corner of the world you're sitting in right now, drop it in the comments. I want to know how far this one reaches. Because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about my own life. And I think it's going to do the same thing to you. My name is Ryan. I'm 57 years old. I'm tall, 6'3" on a good day, and I still carry decent muscle, the kind that doesn't disappear no matter how many years of quiet living you stack on top of it. I have one arm. The right one is gone, from the elbow down. I lost it years ago, somewhere overseas, under circumstances I cannot fully explain. Not because I'm hiding something. Because I genuinely do not remember. There was a deployment. There was fighting. There was pain so severe it carved a hole through my memory and left nothing on the other side but scar tissue and silence. And then there was this life. A small house. A quiet town. Morning walks through streets I'd memorized over a decade of repetition. Grocery runs on the way home. Breakfast on the table by 7, every single morning, without fail. My wife Catherine leaving for work with a kiss on my cheek. Dinner. A paperback novel. Bed. And then the whole thing again, the next day, exactly the same. People look at me and they see a man who's been through something and came out the other side with less than he started with. They see the missing arm and they feel sorry. They see my age and they assume I'm harmless. And then they see Catherine, my wife, who looks a full decade younger than she is, who draws every eye in every room she walks into, and about half of them assume I must be her father. I stopped correcting them a long time ago. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being invisible. It's not always a curse. Sometimes it's the only reason you're still breathing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where this story actually begins. There's a photograph on the shelf in our living room. It's been there for years, I walk past it every single day without thinking about it. Catherine and a man in a military dress uniform. She looks young in it. Maybe early 20s. She's smiling, but it's a different kind of smile than the one I know. Softer. More open. The kind of smile a daughter gives her father when she doesn't yet know how much the world is going to cost her. I found out who that man was about 6 months before everything fell apart. And when I did, nothing in my life was ever the same again. Catherine suggested the trip on a Tuesday evening. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, me on one end of the couch with a paperback, her on the other with her phone, and she looked up and said, just like that, out of nowhere, how about we go somewhere? A real trip. Overseas. I looked at her. Spain, she said, when I asked where. We'd talked about Spain before, it was supposed to be our honeymoon, years ago, but the money wasn't there and the timing was wrong and we'd ended up going to Savannah, Georgia instead. Catherine had fallen in love with Savannah. Visited it a few more times since. But this was different. This was abroad. This was real. I watched her plan it over the following weeks and it was like watching someone come back to life. New clothes, a light summer dress, a leather travel bag she'd been eyeing for months. Printed maps with little circles around restaurants and museums. Lists of neighborhoods to walk through. She moved through the house with an energy I hadn't seen in years, almost giddy, pointing things out to me like a child on Christmas morning. Watching her like that, I felt something settle in my chest. Something warm and quiet and close to peace. I started to feel it too, the anticipation. The idea of just stepping out of our routine and being somewhere completely new, together, with nothing but each other and open time stretching out ahead of us. There was one moment, though. One small moment, while I was helping her pack the night before we left. I glanced down at my right arm, or where it used to be. A phantom pain flickered through the stump, the way it sometimes does. And I wondered, briefly, whether getting on a plane might stir something. Some fragment of memory from the time I can't reach. I pushed the thought away. Catherine was happy. That was enough. The following month, we went. We arrived at the airport 2 hours early, the way Catherine liked to do. Everything felt calm. Normal. Good. She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward our gate, her head tilted against my shoulder, pointing out things she found interesting, the architecture of the terminal, a family arguing cheerfully over luggage, the way the light came through the glass ceiling in long golden shafts. For about 10 minutes, it was perfect. We had no idea that the next 10 minutes would change everything. We decided to walk around the terminal before boarding. Catherine wanted to see the whole airport, she always did that, wherever we traveled, wanted to absorb a place before she moved through it. Just a few minutes, I told her. That's all it took. They came out of nowhere. 4 men. Big. The kind of physical presence that fills up space on purpose, that makes a hallway feel narrower just by being in it. They stepped directly into our path and stopped, blocking us completely, and the one in front, the biggest, with a jaw like a slab of granite and hands the size of dinner plates, looked me up and down with an expression of open contempt. "Hey, old man," he said. His voice was casual. Almost friendly. The way someone sounds when they're enjoying themselves. "Why don't you leave the beautiful lady and go find somewhere else to be?" Catherine's grip on my arm tightened. Just slightly. I felt it. I stepped back, pulling her behind me. She stumbled, not badly, but enough that I dropped to one knee to catch her, my hand on her back, steadying her. When I looked back up at the men, my heart was pounding. Not from anger. From something older. Something more instinctive. Something that lived in the part of me that couldn't be reached by conscious thought. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. The men laughed. Not all of them, just 2, the ones flanking the leader. The leader himself kept looking at me the same way. Like I was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. "Didn't you hear us?" he said. "We'll take care of her now. You can go." He made a shooing gesture, casual, dismissive, like waving away an insect. And then the man to his right, younger, buzzcut, a scar across his chin, stepped forward and reached out his hand. Toward Catherine. Not toward me. Toward her. Like I wasn't even there. Like I didn't exist. Catherine pushed his hand away. And something shifted in the room that I had never seen before and will never forget. Her face changed. Not into anger, not the kind I recognized, anyway. It was something colder. Something sharper. Something that looked like it had been sitting inside her, coiled and patient, waiting for a specific moment to finally uncoil. And this was it. She looked at the 4 men, all of them, one by one, and when she spoke, her voice was flat and steady and completely without bluff. "Are you ready for this?" she said. The men stopped. Actually stopped. The one who had reached for her pulled his hand back. The leader's expression flickered, just barely, just for a fraction of a second, but it was there. Something behind his eyes that looked almost like recognition. Like he already knew the answer to her question. I stood there, one knee on the ground, looking up at my wife's face, and I realized something I should have realized years ago. I did not fully know this woman. Not the way I thought I did. There was something inside her, something deep and old and powerful, that I had never once seen the surface of. And I was only beginning to understand what it was. The leader didn't back down. He grabbed my jacket collar with one hand and hauled me to my feet like I weighed nothing. Up close he was enormous, 250 pounds of solid muscle, 6'4", breath warm on my face. His grip on my collar was so tight I could feel the fabric cutting into the back of my neck. "Come at me, old man," he said. I looked at my left hand. My only hand. Hanging at my side. I looked at the size of the man in front of me. I thought about the math. A 57-year-old with one arm against a man built like a weapon. Then I looked at Catherine. She was standing a few feet behind me, very still, watching. And the way she was looking at me, I have turned this over in my mind 1,000 times since, trying to find the right words for it, and I still can't. It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. It was something more layered than either. Something that said, "I see you. All of you. The parts you know and the parts you've forgotten. And I trust you. I trust you to do what needs to be done." Our eyes locked. For maybe 2 seconds. Maybe 3. And then the man swung. Everything slowed down. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I mean the world actually seemed to decelerate, his fist coming toward my face in what felt like slow motion, the crowd behind him frozen mid-step, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were underwater. Time stretched out the way people describe it stretching during accidents, during falls, during moments when the body knows something catastrophic is about to happen before the mind catches up. And somewhere deep inside me, somewhere my conscious mind hadn't been able to touch in over 10 years, something woke up. My left hand moved. Not because I told it to. Not because I thought about it or calculated an angle or made any kind of decision. My hand just moved. On its own. Like it had been coiled up inside me, patient and ready, for exactly this moment, and all it needed was the right trigger. A single punch. Clean. Precise. My fist connected with the center of his chest, right on the sternum, where the bones meet, and the force of it traveled through his entire body in one devastating wave. He went down. Not stumbling. Not staggering. Down. Completely, instantly down, like someone had cut every string holding him upright. His eyes rolled back. His body hit the airport floor with a sound I will never forget, heavy, final, the sound of a man whose entire nervous system had just been switched off by a blow it never saw coming. And I stood there staring at my own hand like it belonged to someone else. That's the part that scared me more than anything. More than the fight. More than the man on the ground. More than the screams that started echoing through the terminal a second later. My mind was calm. Impossibly, terrifyingly calm. Like I was watching this happen to someone else entirely. Like the person who had just knocked a 250-pound man unconscious with a single punch was not me at all, but someone who had briefly stepped into my body and was now stepping back out. Someone I used to be. Someone I didn't remember being. A woman screamed somewhere in the crowd. The other three men were staring at their friend on the ground with expressions I can only describe as stunned. Not angry. Not threatening. Stunned. Like they had just witnessed something they had not expected to see. I dropped to my knees beside the fallen man. I called out to him. Nothing. No response. I pressed my fingers to his wrist, no pulse. I pressed them to his neck, nothing. I leaned my ear close to his mouth and heard only silence. He wasn't breathing. The panic hit me then. Whatever this man had done, whatever he was a human being and he was dying on the floor in front of me and I had put him there. I started CPR. I did the best I could remember, which wasn't much. I pushed down on his chest with my one hand, counting in my head, trying to keep the rhythm right. It wasn't working. His skin was going pale. The other three men just stood there, watching, not moving to help. Come on, I said. Come on. Breathe. Nothing. And then someone pushed through the crowd. He moved through the onlookers with a calm, purposeful stride, not rushing, not panicking, but moving with the specific efficiency of someone who had dealt with emergencies before. An older man. Late 60s, maybe older. Neatly dressed. A small leather bag over one shoulder. He knelt beside the fallen man without a word, opened his bag, pulled out a compact defibrillator, placed the electrodes on the man's chest, and pressed a button. The man's body jolted. Once. Hard. A few seconds passed. Then he coughed, wet, ugly, gasping, and his eyes fluttered open. He blinked. Drooled. Shivered. Alive. The stranger stood up. Tucked the defibrillator back into his bag with the same calm efficiency he'd pulled it out with. Then he turned and looked at me. And he smiled. It was a gentle smile. A knowing smile. The kind of smile that belongs to someone who has seen something interesting and wants to talk about it. We should talk somewhere quieter, he said. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know anything about him. But I knew, I felt it in my bones, that this man was connected to everything. To me. To Catherine. To the missing years and the missing arm and the missing truth that had been sitting underneath my life like a foundation I couldn't see. And when I turned to look at Catherine, when I saw the way she was looking at this stranger, it wasn't gratitude on her face. It was something much, much colder. All right. I need to pause here for a second, because I want to know what you're thinking right now. Comment 1 if you think Catherine has been planning all of this from the very beginning, every single move, every single moment, orchestrated exactly the way she wanted it. Comment 2 if you think the narrator is going to remember everything on his own, that the truth is going to come back to him without anyone having to tell him. Because what happens next depends entirely on which one of you is right. And I promise you, the answer is going to surprise you. We canceled the trip. Neither Catherine nor I had any appetite for vacation after what had happened. We gave our statements to the airport security officers. Objectively, I was the one who had thrown the punch, I was technically the aggressor. In any normal situation, that would have been enough to get me detained, questioned, possibly charged. But the man I'd hit didn't press charges. The stranger, the one who had revived him, spoke to the security team on my behalf, calmly and clearly, confirming it was self-defense after I'd been physically grabbed first. And just like that, I was free to go. I didn't think about why, at the time. I was too shaken. Too rattled by what my body had done without my permission, by the eerie calm that had settled over my mind during the fight, by the way my hand still tingled hours later like it remembered the impact even though my brain couldn't quite process what had happened. But looking back now, looking back with everything I know, the fact that this stranger was there, ready, with exactly the right words at exactly the right moment, tells me one thing very clearly. He had been expecting this to happen. He had been waiting for it. That night I couldn't sleep. Something had shifted inside me. Not a full memory, not yet, but something like a crack in a wall. A hairline fracture where light was beginning to get through. The fight had done something. Stirred something loose from whatever place inside me those years had been sealed away. I started noticing things I'd walked past 1,000 times without seeing. Or things I'd seen and never let myself think about. The first one was the photograph in the book. Catherine had given me a leather-bound collection of short stories on our wedding day. A beautiful gift, thoughtful, quiet, exactly the kind of thing she always chose. I'd read the book twice over the years. But I had never opened it past the last story. Inside the back cover, tucked into a small interior pocket, was a photograph. It showed a younger Catherine, maybe early 20s, standing next to an older man in a military dress uniform. She was smiling. He was smiling. It looked like a moment from a life that had been good, before something happened to it that made it stop being good. I stared at that photograph for a long time. I recognized the man. Not from memory, not from anything I could actually recall seeing or experiencing. I recognized him the way you sometimes recognize a face in a dream. A deep, wordless knowing that bypassed conscious thought entirely. Catherine's father. I didn't know how I knew that. But I did. A few days later, Catherine went out for the afternoon. I don't know what made me do what I did next. Maybe it was the crack in the wall getting wider. Maybe it was the photograph. Maybe it was the way Catherine had looked at the stranger at the airport, that cold, unreadable expression that I hadn't been able to shake since I'd seen it. I went to the back of our bedroom closet. Behind the winter coats, behind the boxes of old tax records, behind everything we'd accumulated in 11 years of quiet married life, there was a box. Plain cardboard. No label. No writing on the outside. Nothing to suggest it was anything other than another forgotten container of household miscellany. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were old medical records. Pages of them, clinical, dense, redacted in places with thick black bars that swallowed entire sentences. There were military files, stamped and dated, with sections blacked out so thoroughly that whole paragraphs were invisible. And at the very bottom, folded once, carefully, like something that had been handled many times, was a handwritten letter. I unfolded it. The paper was yellowed. The ink had faded in places, and the handwriting was slightly uneven, the kind of uneven that comes from writing quickly, or under pressure, or both. It was addressed to someone I didn't recognize. A name and title I couldn't fully make out through the wear on the paper. But the content was clear. It was a plea. Written by a man, I could tell from the tone, from the weight of authority even as it begged, asking someone not to do something to me. Not to erase me. Not to destroy what I was. The words stopped me cold. Not because they were eloquent, though they were. Because they were desperate. Written by someone who knew he was losing an argument and was making one last, furious attempt to win it. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I didn't fully understand. Not yet. Not all of it. But I understood enough. Enough to know that my life, every quiet morning, every peaceful walk, every moment of contentment I had ever felt, was built on top of something much darker than I had ever imagined. And then I found the last document in the box. A single sheet of paper. At the top, written in neat, typed letters, a name. And beneath it, a title. Senior Intelligence Officer. Psychological Operations Division. I didn't recognize the name. Not at all. It meant nothing to me. But when I brought it to Catherine that evening, when I held the paper out to her and watched her face as she read it, the color drained out of her like someone had pulled a plug. Her expression went completely still. Not surprised. Not confused. Something else entirely. Something that looked like a door she had been keeping locked for a very long time had just been opened from the wrong side. She looked at me. And for the first time since I had known her, she looked afraid. Not of the name. Of me seeing it. You weren't supposed to find that yet, she said. Quietly. Almost to herself. Catherine sat down across from me at the kitchen table the next morning. She didn't cry. Not then. She sat straight, hands folded in front of her, and she told me the truth with a steadiness that reminded me, strangely, of someone delivering a military briefing. Every sentence measured. Every fact presented in order. No emotion allowed to show on the surface. She had known the truth about me since before we were married. Her father had told her, not in person, but through a series of letters he had left behind. Letters written knowing he might not survive long enough to deliver them himself. I had not been an ordinary soldier. I had been part of a special operations unit, the kind that doesn't officially exist, the kind whose existence is denied at every level of government. I had been sent overseas to end a civil war. And according to what Catherine had pieced together from her father's letters and from the documents she had spent years collecting, I had done it. The number was 96. Enemy combatants neutralized. By me. Alone, or nearly alone, over the course of a single extended operation. 96 lives. The number landed in my chest like a stone dropping into deep water. I felt my breath catch. I felt the kitchen tilt slightly, the way it does when your body registers something your mind hasn't finished processing yet. Catherine kept going. She told me about the injury, the ambush, the loss of my arm, the emergency transport back to the United States. She told me about the organization's decision afterward, that I had become too dangerous to let remember what I was. A weapon that knows it's a weapon is unpredictable. So they erased me. Chemically. Surgically. Whatever method they used, it worked. I woke up days later with no memory of my past, no sense of who I had been, and no way to know that the bewildered man staring at a hospital ceiling was the same man who had walked into a war and ended it with his bare hands. And then Catherine told me about her father. He had opposed the erasure. Furiously. He had argued with everyone who would listen, written memos, demanded meetings, escalated over the heads of the people who had made the decision. He had made the case that I deserved better than to be discarded like a broken tool. That I had given everything the organization had asked of me and I deserved to keep my mind, my identity, my life. They turned him down. But he kept pushing. He refused to accept it. He kept going, kept fighting, kept making noise about it long after everyone else had moved on. And so they dealt with him. Quietly. Efficiently. An accident that no one questioned and no one investigated and no one remembered for very long. Catherine was 19 years old. She found out from his letters. Months after it happened. Months after the funeral, after the grief, after the world had already moved on from the death of one more soldier in a long line of soldiers who died doing things no one was supposed to know about. I looked at her across the kitchen table and I tried to imagine it. 19 years old. Reading letters from a dead father that told her everything, told her what had been done to me, told her why he had died, told her that the man she was now responsible for caring for was both the reason for his death and the person he had given his life to protect. And then I tried to imagine what it had cost her to carry that knowledge alone, without telling a single person, for over a decade, while she smiled at me every morning and kissed me on the cheek when she left for work and planned vacations to Spain like a woman with nothing heavier on her shoulders than a travel itinerary. Catherine didn't wait for me to react. She kept going. For 10 years, she said, she had been building a file. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Quietly. One document at a time. One name at a time. One piece of evidence at a time, collected over the course of years with a patience and discipline that I was only now beginning to understand was the most defining thing about her. She had tracked down other soldiers who had been erased by the same program. Found records of other families destroyed. Documented a pattern that went back decades, a systematic, institutional practice of disposing of inconvenient assets by wiping their minds and releasing them into the world like ghosts. And she wasn't planning to take it to the media. She wasn't planning a public exposé. She was planning to send it, all of it, every piece of evidence, every name, every document, directly to the internal oversight bodies within the intelligence community itself. The people with the authority and the motivation to tear the program apart from the inside. 3 separate bodies. Simultaneously. So that no single person could suppress it before the others received it. I didn't need to destroy him with my hands, Catherine said. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between defiance and exhaustion, like a soldier who has been fighting for so long she's forgotten what the world looked like before the war started. I just needed to make sure the people he worked for destroyed him for me. The airport had been the final piece. The proof that my combat instincts were still active, that the erasure had never been permanent, that the organization's greatest weapon was walking around buying groceries and reading paperback novels and could still, at any moment, become exactly what it had been before. That was what she needed to complete the file. That was what made it impossible to ignore or bury or explain away. I sat there for a long time after she finished talking. The kitchen was quiet. Morning light came through the window in a single bright stripe across the table. I looked at the documents spread in front of me, pages and pages of evidence that Catherine had assembled over a decade of silent, patient work, and I thought about all those mornings. All those breakfasts I had made her. All those walks I had taken through quiet streets while she sat at a desk somewhere, building a case that would bring down the man who had murdered her father. The woman I thought I was protecting had been the one protecting me the entire time. And I hadn't seen a single move she made. Catherine reached across the table and slid a folder toward me. A thick one, manila, unmarked on the outside. She set it down in front of me and looked at me with those steady eyes. It went out this morning, she said. To 3 different bodies. Simultaneously. I opened the folder. Inside was a cover letter, formal, precise, devastating in its detail, addressed to 3 separate oversight committees. And at the top of the first page, the name of the person it concerned. The same name. The exact same name from the document I had found in the box. I looked up at Catherine. It's already done, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine moved through our days the way she always had. Calm. Unhurried. Present. She made dinner. She read in the evenings. She walked beside me when we went to the grocery store and held my hand the way she always did, fingers laced through mine, warm and steady. But there was a quietness to her that was different than usual. Not anxious, not the restless kind of quiet that comes from waiting for something bad to happen. Something else. Something more like the stillness of a person who has set something in motion and knows, with absolute certainty, that it is going to do exactly what it was designed to do. I noticed it. But I didn't press her. I trusted her. After everything she had told me, after everything she had done, there was nothing left in me that could doubt her. And then one morning, about 2 weeks after the file went out, I came downstairs to find Catherine at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand. She wasn't scrolling. She wasn't searching for something. She was just sitting there, very still, looking at the screen. And her expression was something I had seen only a handful of times in our entire marriage, a quiet, deep, almost private satisfaction. The kind of feeling that doesn't need to be spoken out loud because it already fills the entire room. She turned the phone toward me without saying anything. It was a news alert. Small. Not from a major outlet, just a brief local report. It said that a former intelligence operative had been found wandering in a city I didn't recognize. No identification. No memory of how he had arrived. Confused. Disoriented. Unable to provide his own name when asked. Not amnesia from a drug. Not a breakdown. Not a dramatic collapse. Just a man whose entire world had been quietly, systematically dismantled from underneath him, his pension revoked, his security clearance pulled, his network of contacts and allies and protectors evaporating overnight as every person connected to him scrambled to distance themselves before the full scope of what he'd done became public record. He didn't lose his mind. He lost everything around it. And in the end, that was worse. Catherine closed the phone. Set it down on the table. Picked up her coffee and took a slow sip, looking out the window at the morning light. She said nothing. I watched her for a long moment, this woman who had spent 10 years quietly dismantling the life of the man who had destroyed hers, who had done it with patience and precision and a cold, focused purpose that most people never develop in a lifetime, and I felt something shift inside me. Something fundamental. Something about the way I understood who she was and what she was capable of and what it meant to truly know another person. I looked at Catherine across the breakfast table. And for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I saw her clearly. "It's over," she said. And for the first time, I believed it. That evening we sat together on the couch. The same couch we'd had since the first year of our marriage, the cushions worn soft in the middle from years of use. Catherine had a glass of wine. I had coffee. The house was quiet in the specific way it gets quiet on evenings when nothing needs to be said and nothing needs to be done and the world outside can wait until tomorrow. And Catherine told me about her father. Not the way she had told me before, not as evidence, not as part of a case, not as facts arranged in chronological order to support a conclusion. This time she told me about him as a person. As a man she had loved. He had been a senior officer. The kind of man who believed in the chain of command but also believed, genuinely, stubbornly believed, that the people underneath him were more than assets. More than tools to be used and discarded. He had spent his entire career fighting for his soldiers. Not because it made him look good or because it advanced his position. Because he thought it was right. When the organization decided to erase me, he opposed it. Loudly. He wrote memos that no one wanted to read. He demanded meetings that no one wanted to attend. He escalated over the heads of the people who had made the decision, appealing to anyone at all, who might have the authority or the conscience to stop it. They listened. They just didn't care. And when he kept pushing, when he refused, absolutely refused, to accept that a man who had bled for his country could be thrown away like a piece of broken equipment, they removed him. Quietly. The way they removed everyone who became inconvenient. An accident. A closed file. A name that stopped appearing in reports and eventually stopped appearing anywhere at all. Catherine was 19. She found out from his letters. The ones he had written before he died, knowing what was coming, knowing he couldn't stop it, but needing his daughter to know the truth in case he didn't survive long enough to tell her himself. He died because he wouldn't let them turn you into nothing, Catherine said. Her voice was steady. But her hands, wrapped around the wine glass, were not. They trembled, just slightly, in a way I had never noticed before. Or maybe I had noticed, and had simply never understood what it meant. And I spent 10 years making sure it meant something. I set down my coffee. I moved closer to her on the couch. I wrapped my one arm around her shoulders, pulled her close, held her as tightly as I could with what I had left, and she pressed her face into the side of my neck and cried. Not from guilt. Not from shame. Not from any of the things she had been afraid I would feel toward her for lying. From relief. From the weight of 10 years finally being lifted off her shoulders. From the knowledge that the war she had been fighting, alone, in silence, every single day, while I sat beside her on this very couch reading paperback novels, was over. I held her for a long time. The evening light faded outside the window, turning the room gold and then amber and then dark. Catherine's body shook against mine, and I felt every tremor, every breath, and I held her tighter because I didn't know what else to do. Because holding her was the only thing I could offer, the only thing my one arm could give, and it wasn't enough, it would never be enough, but it was everything I had. I couldn't remember her father. I couldn't remember the man who had given his life so that I could keep mine. But I could see him in her. In everything she was. In the way she had loved me without ever asking me to be anything other than what I was. In the way she had fought a war I didn't know existed and won it and never once, not a single time, asked for credit or recognition or even acknowledgement. Some lies, I told her, are the only reason certain people are still alive. And I didn't blame her. Not for a single second. Not for one moment of the 11 years we had spent together. Catherine pulled back. Wiped her face with the back of her hand. And smiled. Not a forced smile. Not a brave smile. A real one. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and costs nothing and means everything. So, she said. Spain? And I laughed. It was the first time in 10 years that a laugh had come out of me like that, from somewhere deep, from somewhere real, from a place inside me that I hadn't known was still capable of producing that kind of sound. It surprised me. It surprised Catherine too. She blinked, and then her smile widened, and for a moment we just sat there looking at each other like two people who had just survived something enormous and were only now beginning to understand how close they had come to not surviving it at all. Yeah, I said. Let's go to Spain. We went. No drama. No flashbacks. No lingering threat. Just two people, a man missing an arm and a woman who had been fighting a war he didn't know about, stepping off a plane into the Spanish sunshine and breathing in air that smelled like salt and olive trees and a future that belonged entirely to them. Catherine was radiant. She moved through the streets of Barcelona the way she moved through everything, with genuine, unguarded curiosity. Pointing at the architecture. Stopping to photograph the way light hit the buildings in the late afternoon. Pulling me into tiny restaurants where the food was extraordinary and the wine was cheap and cold and the owners spoke no English and it didn't matter at all. One evening, we sat at a small cafe on a narrow street overlooking a plaza. The sun was setting, turning everything the color of honey. Catherine had a glass of something local. I had coffee. Music drifted from somewhere nearby, something old and unhurried, carried on the warm air. She pulled out a map. An actual paper map, the kind she had bought at a shop that morning. She spread it out on the table between us and traced her finger along the borders of countries, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Norway, Ireland, circling them one by one, making a list out loud of everywhere she wanted to go. All of Europe. One a year, she said, looking up at me with that smile. If we do one a year, we'll have to live past 100 to finish. I looked at the map. At all those countries she wanted to see. At all those years stretching out ahead of us like an open road with no end in sight. Then I looked at her. Living past 100. Just to keep watching her smile at the world the way she was smiling at it right now. That sounded like more than enough reason to keep going. I don't remember who I was before all of this. The man I used to be, the soldier, the operative, the one who could walk into a war and end it, he's gone. Erased. Buried. Finished. I don't mourn him. I'm not sure I should. But I know exactly who I am now. I'm the man who sits across from Catherine at breakfast every morning. The man who makes her coffee before she wakes up. The man who holds her hand when they walk through foreign cities and reads paperback novels on park benches and falls asleep at night next to someone who loved him from the very first day, not because she was asked to, not because she was obligated to, but because she chose to. I lost my arm. I lost my memory. I lost 10 years of the truth about my own life. But I have my left hand. And I have Catherine. And for the first time in my life, in this life, the one I can actually remember, that is more than enough. If this story hit you the way I think it did, and I have a feeling it did, hit that like button, subscribe. Right now. Because stories like this deserve to be heard.